Donald Trump has literally done everything in his power to delay his January 6th criminal trial. At the moment, his argument of presidential immunity has put the brakes on Trump's case as the Supreme Court prepares to consider it. And that gambit may work by pushing a possible trial date closer and closer to the election. Today, we're learning new details about how the Justice Department's investigation into January 6th itself unfolded and how the process may have inadvertently played into Trump's hands. The New York Times reports that at the start of the probe, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, encouraged prosecutors to, quote, follow the connective tissue upward, adding a directive that would eventually lead to a dead end. Follow the money. With that, he set the course of a determined and methodical, if at times dysfunctional and maddeningly slow investigation that would yield the indictment of Donald Trump on 4 counts of election interference in August of 2023. As the Times notes that, as a result, prosecutors in the FBI spent months sticking to their traditional playbook. They started with smaller players and worked upward, despite the transparent, well-documented steps taken by Mr. Trump himself in public and behind the scenes to retain power after voters rejected his bid for another term. Joining me now is Ankush Khardori, senior writer for Political Magazine and a former Department of Justice federal prosecutor who specialized in financial fraud. Ankush, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, tell me what the issue is here, because this did unfold. The investigation sort of unfolded like a financial crime investigation would. You find people lower and lower on the totem pole, and you move your way up until you have enough evidence to convict the people on top. Why was that not the right strategy in this case?
So, look, it's not necessarily how a financial fraud investigation works, particularly if you have a very large organization and a managerial class at the top. And you can roughly analogize that to what we saw on January 6th. You have all these people at the bottom, and then you have a hierarchy at the top, Trump, all these White House folks, and the people in the Trump campaign orbit who are doing something at a higher level that may also warrant some scrutiny. These paths, like pursuing the rioters and pursuing Trump, the potential Trump campaign officials and people around him, Rudy Giuliani and the like, they were not mutually exclusive. That is the big problem with the premise underlying the Justice Department's approach here. They keep saying, even in this piece, we were just following a traditional playbook, moving ourselves from the bottom to the top. But it never had to proceed like that, and it shouldn't have proceeded like that. And it's important to remember that it was just a few days before January 6th that we all heard the call that Donald Trump had with Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. That call alone, and I wrote a piece on this that published on January 6th, actually, that call alone warranted the opening of a federal criminal investigation as soon as Biden took office, or at a minimum, as soon as Merrick Garland took office.
So that's the question that many people have, and that is that if there appears to be evidence out in the open with participants in matters that needed to be examined who could be subpoenaed and one could get information, why not move in that obvious direction? What was holding them back? Were they worrying about something else? Was there an investigation underway for which these added pieces of information did not sort of lend themselves? Why wouldn't the obvious be the case?
It's a very good question, and this piece doesn't really answer it, right? Even though it's remarkably good reporting. My sense, having also done a little bit of reporting around this, is that there was a real reluctance to pursue Trump in a manner that made it look like it was political retaliation, or that it was a Democrat pursuing a Republican, or some sort of partisan affair, and that sort of was something that Merrick Garland in particular was quite concerned about. And, some of the arguments in the piece that we hear from some of the officials who were involved are frankly, had me kind of pulling my hair out, because the piece quotes someone saying that, in 2021, it was, quote unquote, simply inconceivable that Trump might ever return to the political stage. That person is quoted anonymously, and my sincere advice to them is to stay anonymous forever, because that was not true.
Right, because that's correct. There was nobody who believed that was true. I want to point out what you talked about, Merrick Garland. On the first anniversary of January 6th, Merrick Garland was asked by reporters about why this is taking so long. Here's what he said.
We understand that there are questions about how long the investigation will take and about what exactly we are doing. Our answer is, and will continue to be, the same answer we would give with respect to any ongoing investigation. As long as it takes, and whatever it takes, for justice to be done consistent with the facts and the law.
The problem is the as long as it takes and whatever it takes are now coming up against one another.
That's exactly right. And I think the easiest way to think about kind of the path that was not taken by the Justice Department is to look at what the January 6th committee did, because they did pretty much exactly what I'm describing. Straight to the top, go to the principles, don't dilly-dally, with the rioters and hoping that you can work yourself, from them to Trump years down the line. Straight to the top, efficient, move aggressively, move quickly. And, I think that, the January 6th committee, did a considerable service for the public just in revealing the facts, but they also demonstrated that the Justice Department's approach was deeply flawed.
I want to ask you about this as somebody who has dealt with financial crimes in the past. The Times reports that Garland told prosecutors to focus on the money. Department leaders believe that the best way to justify prosecuting Mr. Trump and the Willard plotters, talking about the Willard Hotel, was to find financial links between them and the rioters because they thought it would be more straightforward and less risky than a case based on untested election interference charges. Look, we have the benefit of evaluating that thinking. In hindsight, didn't turn out to be true. But what do you think about the fact that they started by taking that approach? Let's connect the money. I mean, we hear about that all the time. Follow the money.
Again, these things are not mutually exclusive. I mean, that's why the premise that the defenders here have adopted, it's just simply not true. I mean, let's just remember, again, Trump was already on a recorded call before January 6th, and it was apparent even from that call that Trump might have criminal exposure under Title 18, Section 241, which is one of the statutes he was eventually charged under. It is an election fraud statute. So these were not obscure issues. These were not things that people were not thinking about in real time, arguing about and advocating for in real time, including quite candidly myself. I wrote a lot of pieces about this and about my concerns that the Justice Department was moving too slowly, and in particular that there would be a problem if Trump eventually tried to return to power, that he may actually be able to outrun the case. And we're seeing that.
These cases are all important, but the January 6th case, because it's election interference, because it talks about the right to vote and to have your vote counted, it is the most important case. What's your sense of the likelihood of this going to trial before the election?
Look, I think it's unfortunately just brass tacks. I think it's fairly low. I would like to see it go to trial. I think the public's interest and the public imperative here is very strong, and that the law is on the side of having it move forward before November. However, the Supreme Court is moving slowly. I am concerned that they may try to send it back to Chutkan with some instructions to conduct some more legal analysis and potentially preliminary fact-finding. If that happens, that could be the whole ballgame.
Ankush, thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate your analysis and your expertise. Ankush Khardari is a senior writer for Politico magazine and the former Department of Justice federal prosecutor specializing in financial and white-collar crime.